Hey YouTube, we're back with the aerocommander again, working on our lighting project here. This is part 2. Where we last left off, we were just getting a resistor picked out, and what we're in the process of doing now is just verifying our connection points, so when we go to put these into the plane, we can get them back to where they need to be. It's always a good idea to vet your work as you go on something like this. Just make sure you don't see anything weird before you move on to the next step, and then you should be in pretty good shape by the time you get there. So now I have to make a tough decision about how I'm going to handle this. The green light, and just going back to the drawing here. The green light, of course, is going to be over here on this side. As you can see, we got our green light there. Now this plane has, well, that's kind of interesting. I don't remember hitting this at all, but I evidently bumped it, or maybe that was just a manufacturing defect, which wouldn't surprise me. So I have to make a decision about where the wires are going to route. And on this plane, it's just a different plane in that technically we could open up the nacelle and we could actually tap power from the servo, which is inside there. It's kind of hard to get on camera just because of the nature of the shape of this plane and my headgear that's got the camera mounted. But if I spin this, see the servo, guys? That's a long throw. There's your linear servo. And that runs a linkage that comes out right here and then transfers the movement into the aileron. So, a couple of different options here. One, I need to protect here and here in the event that I can make flaps work later on. Might be a pipe dream, but still I want to protect it. And secondly, I'm going to have a light back here. I'm going to have the white light. So when I did my Cessna 182 UMX, I was able to route the cables just straight into the wing without cutting channels and things like that. And to be honest, channels in such thin wings, it can be done, but it's actually very difficult to do it successfully, in my experience. The other thing is we're going to have the lights right here, probably at the midpoint back. Excuse me, in this case it'd be the green one, so it's going to be over here. I might actually need to try to address that squishing. I didn't realize that was squished over there. But I'll cut the lights in here, and there is a seam line here, so I could go down the length of the wing that way. And I'm just trying to see if this thing, how this nacelle is attached. It's a two-piece nacelle, but it looks like it might be glued together. And if it's glued together, then that kind of limits my choices. Obviously, opening up the plane is not that big a deal because we would just have to cut this tape here. And then we should be able to lift this off. Which is probably what we're going to end up having to do. Ideally, I can get the wires back to the central location, and I won't even have to open it up. I can just take one of these servo wires and detach it from the servo connector back where my index finger is, and pull it out to where I can access it, and then tap that wire and then plug it back in, and that'll power our circuit. But I'm going to need some room to get my resistors and all that terminated. So that's why the leads are so long on my cables. So without further ado, I think we need to make a decision. So I'm pretty much faced with a tough choice. I either go here on the front or I go down the seam, and I think down the seam is the safest bet. So watching this seam, the seam looks like a pretty safe bet, and then I'll bring my wires in from the top and then down. And one thought about that is that once we get the wires in, the wires are going to be entering the plane about here, okay? there's some suspension work under here. So we're going to be just right behind that. So almost exactly on the CG, in fact. Now, the big drawback is that it'll be visible from the top. Well, the thing is, maybe it would be better to go on the bottom then, right where this carbon fiber rod is. Because we kind of already have a channel here. We could do that. And I guess honestly my big concern at this point is I'm going to have the wires coming for the red light or for the white lights on the landing gear here. That should be no problem. But then I'm also going to have this, and there's already that stripe of black, so it might work nice to go underneath in this case. Now, if you peel this paint up, or if you peel this tape up, you're going to peel the paint, so it might be better to just cut this plastic, drop it down, and then put another piece of tape on, and that would allow us to drop. Those wires are so dang dinky. Okay, so this is our green light. Let's start getting some action on this. So we've established that, you know, and it's interesting, this, I keep saying this is the green light, but this is actually not the green light. That's a white light. So I pulled that out, and that was not correct. So now what I need to do is I need to make sure I get the green light. They're so similar sized now. This is red, this one's green. So I should probably... Okay, so it's disconnected. So this is the green light. Okay, so just so you can see, got a pretty good amount of length on that wire. Okay, so we got our green light here, and I can tell because I marked it a little bit. So my first step needs to be to position this thing, and then we'll deal with wiring from there. Okay? So I'm just taking my fingernails and just kind of running them so I can pull this wire tight, because it's going to be a lot easier to do that now while I don't have everything assembled. Okay? So really I need to kind of get this thing either glued right onto the surface, or I need to recess it a little bit. And I think recessing it a little bit is going to be a good idea in this application. Just going to pull this stuff out of the way. If you don't have a sharp knife, replace your blade before you start this, because you want to preserve the look of the aircraft if you can. Now, I don't ever put my resistors right on the LED because I don't want that stuff out here. I'd rather hide that inside if we can. Okay, so just looking at the size of this LED, I'm going to take my fingernail and I'm just going to bend this wire. Okay, so you can see the size of the LED is such that we're not quite the height of the, or the thickness of the wing. And I really hate having this tail supporting the aircraft, so I'm going to find another piece of foam, like possibly one of these, to hold this thing up. Sometimes these planes sit upside down just fine. Sometimes they sit upside down really nasty. It just depends on the plane. Okay, so my first goal is to try to get as much visibility forward and backward. So I'm just going to probably go right there, just line up right with the seam. Okay, so my first step is to cut. Just like that. I'm using my finger as a backer. See that? That holds the foam so it doesn't break up nasty on you. Okay, so we'll just take that little piece. I don't think I got quite wide enough there yet. Okay, so now just slightly down angle. Okay, cool. So there you have it. So that's what that's gonna My autofocus is really working poorly, guys. I'm sorry. There it goes, finally. Okay. So now the next step is try to get these into the groove. Now, a couple different thoughts. One, that's going to hide nicely in there. But like I said, I don't want to peel this tape up. At least not on the red. We could peel it up here if we wanted. And we need to try to get that wire underneath here. So I'm thinking probably the safest bet. We really want to get this area covered up with CA as soon as we can so that we can protect that joint. It's going to be the weakest part of the whole electronic structure. Just because of the nature of the wire. And this red really blends in nicely with the red of the plane. So that's cool. I didn't expect that. Happy accident, right? The other thing is, you'll notice that it's, I guess, how about we just get it in here first before we go any further in our considerations. The other thing is, let's double check our polarity is marked. Yep, we have black on this one and we have nothing on the other one, so we'll know which one's black. So I think the next step is just to try to force this down in here with the carbon fiber rod. We'll just do another piece of tape. So I'm just taking my knife and just running it down, getting into the seam here. Okay. Now I stopped just shy there so I can turn my blade around. We'll go ahead and run it still again. Okay, so now my next step is going to be to probably push it down in there, which is going to consist of a tool like this maybe. This is just something I use to mix epoxy, and I like it because it's made of wood, so it's not super sturdy, but I am going to cut the tip off. Shoot it toward the garbage. Okay. That should work pretty good. Now I just need to try to force this stuff into here. Keep your wires tamed as much as you can. That means keeping them from tangling over each other all the time. Okay, so I don't know if this is going to work. This might be a little bit too thick. Might need to use a knife. This wire is always so dang small and hard to work with. I wonder if I could just tape it down and just be done with it. It might be easier to just tape the dang thing down. So there's just nowhere to go with it. That's part of the problem I'm having here, guys. So I think I'm just going to try to tape it down, which, I don't know, it might backfire on us. We'll find out. Good scissors, good tape. I wish I could find tape like this. It's like even thinner, because then I would use that for this sort of project. Okay, so I want to pull off a bigger piece than I need so I can trim off the ends. You don't want to put these little ridged ends where it gets cut by the cutter on the tape dispenser, because that will fight you later too. It'd be awesome if I could separate this in half. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. Since it's clear, I might be able to get away with this. I'm guessing this is not going to pick up very good on film. Although I did cut it in half, and that's satisfactory for what we're doing. Because it's clear, you're not going to notice the indiscrepancy in thickness. Okay, great. That'll work. A little less weight, but still functionally strong. Now I just need to get a reference for how long I want that piece to be. Okay. So now I want the jagged edge to go back, because I suspect we'll get a better adhesion that way. Now the rationale behind cutting this thinner was not just for weight, it was so that I could be on top of another piece of tape. And that's always a good idea, because then you can peel this off if you need to get in there again. Okay? So I want to pull this wire. Gosh, the whole plane is sliding on me. Always seems like these things are a lot more challenging than you might imagine they would be. There's always something in the way too. Don't you worry, guys. When you do it, you'll understand. This plane does seem to be a little bit harder to work with than some of the other ones that I've worked with in the past. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So I got that held down nicely. Guys, I would call that a positive outcome right there. That's very good. I'm very happy with it. Now, there's no rule that says we have to go under. But I mean, honestly, my initial reaction would be, if you went over the top, it might look kind of dumb. However, and I just say this now while we're thinking about it out loud, if we come up here and we make a really tight joint and we come up and over, or we just poke a hole and just put it through loose, it doesn't necessarily have to be tight down to the bottom. We might be able to get away with that. But I think let's just give it a good college try first. We're going to take a Q-tip, or not a Q-tip, a toothpick here, because that's sharp and small. But it's not so sharp it's going to cut. Okay? Then we're just going to take and push along there and just make a channel. We'll see if we get lucky. That'd be sweet if that worked. Now, we're not going to be able to get that in the other side, so we're just going to have to reach through and see if it'll go all the way through. And because I'm not going to be able to have my fingers on it, I'm going to use my forceps with a bent tip. Okay, so forceps with a bent tip. Hang on to the back here. Get some good support and good bite. Push it forward. Oh, I don't want to hit those wires. I need those to be moved slightly. Okay, so it made it through, but learn from my mistakes. I had directed it slightly to the tail, and so it poked a small little indentation there. Not going to be visible, so that's not a big deal. But just taking note of my mistake there. Try not to do that yourself, guys. Alright, so now that we got that through, I'm going to grab this with the forceps and slide it back to me. I'd really like to use this piece to force it through, like a needle that we're using to sew with. But I don't know if I'm going to be so fortunate to be able to do that. Because honestly, I don't know how I'm going to fix it on there. It's going to end up making it thicker. Let's just try to put it through neutrally. Okay? So remember, you don't want to have a big loop in this because this stuff will kink. So you want to be very mindful the way you do this. Okay? So now this last little bit has a mark on it that's black and or not black. And that's going to tell us. Let's see if we get lucky. Kind of highly doubt it. I didn't really think that was going to end up working so good. So, a couple of different ways we could do this. I think the easiest way, honestly, is to glue it on there. And then we'll just force it through from the front. And then we'll cut the tip off. Because we're not going to be terminating these leads that far down anyway. Okay, so we got little CA. We're going to take two of these wires, pull them out here to the tip, control them together like this. Okay, now remember, we want them out on the tip, not at the base, because we're not going to be able to feed it all the way through. And then once we get this through, maybe if we're lucky, we can break off what's needed to be broken off, and then we can go ahead and use it to get through the fuse too. So we're just covering up just a little drip. Okay, so we got a little drip here of CA. And just a little bit of kicker, okay? Lick your fingers. Make sure it's dry and set up. Okay? Noting that this is not foam safe. Okay? So let's see if this works. Cool, so far so good. These little steps always seem like such a non-factor until you go and do them, and then you're like, wow, that was a pain in the butt. And so you guys sitting at home watching this, we'll give it a crack if you want. I'm sure there's much harder things that we've all done, but okay, so it came out and I can see the 2 wires there. That worked pretty sharp, actually. I'm surprised how good that worked. This plane is surprisingly difficult to pick up because you're always hitting something, whether it be a prop or, you know, and UMX planes are already delicate by nature, and so it's very, I don't know, for a guy like me, I'm always nervous I'm going to damage something. Okay, so there's these plastic receivers that seem to take 2 different carbon fiber rods so that they can accomplish their dihedral on the wing. And I think that's what we're looking at there. So I think I'm just going to try to turn this and pull it through. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. See what I'm talking about, guys? Every time I do something, I'm like landing on the propeller or I'm landing on the tail. It's not a big deal. It's just kind of like difficult. Okay, so now the other thing is I have to feed another set of wires through for my landing lights, my simulated wheel lights. Yes, yes, yes. Guys, that's good stuff right there. Now, I just got a brilliant plan. Now that we're through a major hurdle, real quick while we're thinking about it, it's going to get hard to remember which one's which. We have a ground wire and we have a red wire. All the red wires are going to be the same. They're literally all going to go to the same spot. So if you can mark, you know, green, that's going to be hard as heck to tell what that is. Guys, you're not going to be able to see it, I bet. I'm not going to be able to see it. Are you kidding me? It just looks black. Okay, never mind. Well, we answered that question. Normally I'd put a little piece of tape on there and label it. Well, it's not going to do us any good because we have to go through another tight joint there. Okay, so far so good there. So now we need to probably go ahead and get a little bit of CA on there. But honestly, if we don't need CA yet, let's wait. We'll come back to it and CA it later, once we make sure that we have all the alignment proper and we're totally satisfied with that. Now, obviously, we're going to need this to pass it back through. So, you know, I mean, it's a toothpick, it costs like nothing. So I can just leave it there and I'll come back to it when I'm ready to pull it into the fuse. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that scenario with our landing light. Now the landing light's going to be a little bit different. And you remember that one I pulled out, guys? Why don't we go ahead and corroborate what size we want for white. Now, being that these are all going to be coming back centrally, we could hook them up together, which is probably not a bad idea because we have 1 resistor instead of 3. And since they're all getting hooked up side by side, the only issue is you lose a little bit of brightness when you put them in parallel together like that. So it looks like this one's running off of this LED. It's quite bright. I don't see any brightness difference there. And we're running that on a significantly smaller resistor. And then where's my other? There's my red one. Okay, so this is the other white one, which will be one of the landing lights. Let's just validate my theory that if we go ahead and do 2 off of this big one, we're probably still going to be okay. We'll do 3 off the big one. Okay, so we plugged in the negative side first. It popped out though. This stuff is so small. Doesn't like to stay put very well. But there's not a lot of choice. You don't want to thicken it up at all. It just makes it harder to feed through the body of the plane there. Okay, so we're going into the positive now. So this is like the unmarked one. And then this will be the black one here. Kind of hard to tell, but it's got a little black on it. Okay. Okay. So it's on, or it's capable of being on. So there's that. I would say that's negligible. If there's, I would say it's okay. We're just going to try to use one resistor. Now let's take this one out and see if we can put it in as well. And we'll disconnect this LED that's not going to be required in this circuit. This is a solid white, so we'll just put this up here for another application. Well, actually, you know what? We got a resistor in here. Okay, so we got a little resistor there, so we'll run that on a separate resistor. Okay, so this here is another one of our white lights. We want to put them all together. Okay, so that's unmarked. And that one's marked. So that's the minus one. Minus meaning it's the one that's going to go in to the resistor. Okay, so that's plugged in. Went in just fine. When these are tinned, they do behave a little bit better than when they're untinned, but they're still solid core. Okay, so let's watch if there's a negligible difference. I'm actually seeing a bit of a drop now. Not real big fan of that. Okay, so I didn't see a drop with the first one, but I did see a drop with the second one. So maybe I'll go ahead and get this one hooked up on its own resistor. And then we'll use this like as the tail light. So it's the brightest one. And then we'll hook up the left and right wheel lights together. This thing just does not want to slip in all of a sudden. Okay. Okay, so we're good there for sure. Okay, so we have 3 lights of commensurate quality, brightness, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've unplugged this. We know that it's good. Now let's just compare cable length to make sure we're going to be good. Looks like they're very similar, which they should be, because that's the way I designed it to be. Really doesn't matter though, so I'm going to grab this one out and I'm going to label it as W for white. So we just grab a small piece of tape, and this would be like for white tail light on the white. Okay, so we'll just black marker here, white tail light, and that's an individual light. Now we can go ahead and unplug our other 2 whites. Okay. Now we can really truly validate and vet the length of the cables. Okay, yeah, it looks like this one's a little bit longer. Let's verify that again while we got them all together. Okay, so the longest one's the one I need for the taillight. So we'll just set this over here for now. And then these 2 are going to be our wing lights. Okay, so now I need to grab this resistor, and we're going to put this on a separate piece of tape. And this one's going to be the white wing. White wing. White wing times 2. Okay. And so either of these would be fine next, so I'll just grab this one. It looks like I already kind of straightened this wire out. It looks like we're about ready to run out of time on this video from the video series on the aerocommander LED project. And so rather than getting tied up against the wire, we're going to go ahead and call it quits. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. There's more to come. Just you wait and see. Don't forget to like and subscribe.